I'll carry on killing monsters in the ruins of this world until some monster kills me. That is my fate, my reason, my life, and my attitude to the world. And it is not what I chose. It was chosen for me. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Let's have some fun today with another matchup between Aragorn and another leading swordsman from a different franchise, Geralt of Rivia, the Butcher of Blaviken the Witcher himself. While I pulled most of my ideas here from my knowledge of Aragorn and Geralt both, having definitely more familiarity with Aragorn, but still, my other sources may be found in the description below, and like I did for the Aragorn-Jaime Lannister debate, I'm really going to try to look at the argument from all sides and all points of view. This will be a less edited, more of a conversational kind of video, though this video will definitely have a different outcome from the Jaime Lannister one. It's also important to note that I'm going to be drawing kind of from all of the mediums for these two characters, so mostly Aragorn, I'm going to be using the book lore, but it's kind of easy with this scenario to imagine some of his fighting styles and so forth, and what he wears, more from the movies. But as for Geralt, there'll be a mixture of drawing from the games, a bit from the show, not as much from that, but mostly the games and then a bit the books as well. My friends, thank you all for joining me today. Let me know what you think of videos like these and who you would want to see me discuss next. Now let's begin our tale. We're going to go ahead and review both Aragorn and Geralt and kind of go into their strengths as warriors before we start talking about them matched up against each other as a one-on-one, as well as more of a what would a war between the two of these guys and their factions look like. So one-on-one, and then army versus army. So let's start with Aragorn and review his strengths as a warrior, which, again, we've talked about in so many videos on this channel, so feel free to look at those for more lore, more information on Aragorn. But obviously he's a ranger turned king. He is used to diverse battles against monsters and other sword-wielding foes. We've got him being able to chase off Nazgul, being able to fight Nazgul, being able to fight anything from orcs to Uruk-hai to corsairs to trolls to many, many different foes, many of which probably aren't even mentioned within the main events of The Lord of the Rings, but are more in his backstory when he was traveling around Middle-earth, becoming the most hardy of living men in the Third Age of the world. Now, from what we know, too, since he is Númenorian descended, and not only Númenorian, but has the blood of the kings, he stands at a towering height. I believe I've seen that he is somewhere around 6 feet 6 inches tall, and we also know him to be incredibly strong. He's fast-moving and could also wear armor. Many times, especially when we picture Aragorn, he's not usually wearing armor in the movies, but can do so, usually tends to travel light, and at his strongest, which is where we'll take both Aragorn and Geralt, he obviously has Andúril, which is a powerful, magical sword. The sword could not be broken, even in defeat. Now, that is due to the nature of the sheath that Andúril was kept in, given to him by Galadriel of Lothlórien. Looking at the rest of his strengths, he's descended from one of the Maiar and has powers to heal and so forth. Again, truly one of the greatest warriors of men in all of Tolkien's works, but especially in the Third Age. Kind of our leading swordsman when we think about The Lord of the Rings. Alright, now turning our attention to Geralt. Again, I have less familiarity with him. I've played Witcher 3, played a little bit of the Witcher 2 game. I definitely still need to get into the books and more of the lore and all of that. I've watched the show, as good as it used to be. Right, but from what I know about Geralt, and add more in the comments here that I wasn't able to find, but he's a monster hunter. He went through the Witcher trials, which imbued him with a great deal of strength through pain, right? That's why his hair became white, because of all of the different mutations that he took on, more than most Witchers do. So even amongst Witchers, he's a little bit different, right? He's a little bit offset as being one of, if not the most powerful. He has these mutations. He uses different signs and magic. Geralt often adorns this sort of chainmail-like medium type of armor, so he would have some defense, but he's also incredibly agile and evasive. Would also be good at parrying with his own swords, which we'll talk about here in a second. But also potions as well, with herbs that he collects in the wild. He uses 2 swords. Steel sword for this battle, because it's against another human, but obviously a silver sword for monsters. Based on what I'm able to find about his physical proportions, he's 6'2". He's about 61 years old in Witcher 3, from what I'm able to find. And I don't really know his weight, but I'd imagine he and Aragorn are probably comparable weights with that. With him being 61 years old, though, going back to that for a moment, what's interesting is one thing that really offset Aragorn and Jaime Lannister was the fact that Aragorn is in his 80s during The Lord of the Rings, and Jaime would have been in, like, his 30s, I guess. However, with this, Aragorn's age and experience would not set Geralt aside in the same way that it does for Jaime. I mean, yeah, it's still like a 20-year difference, but Geralt still, during his lifetime, took on so many foes, monsters, hunted down all of these different fiends, right, of many different backgrounds. So we can already kind of see how this matchup might go when compared at least to the last one we talked about with Jaime. So let's talk about that fight. One-on-one duel, Aragorn versus Geralt. So based on what I can tell, I think with prep time, if Geralt knew this fight was coming, I really think Geralt wins most of the time, hands down. Here's why. Right, so Geralt, using different potions, and I've got a list of some of these Witcher potions, at least from the game, but I imagine in the lore, in the text, there are probably similar kinds of potions, but the potion of the Blizzard, which boosts his reflexes and reaction time, improves his chance of parrying and evading attacks. Full Moon, which improves his health, right? Again, obviously there's toxicity that could be a problem if Geralt takes too many potions, but I do think if he knew what he was up against with Aragorn, let's say the two knew that this fight was going to happen, I think Geralt would prepare in a way that Aragorn really couldn't. Aragorn would never have faced an enemy quite like Geralt. I would probably honestly say the closest that he would be a Nazgul. So, using some forms of magic and so forth, knowing that who Aragorn was up against was not just your typical run-of-the-mill warrior, but someone that could imbue attacks with otherly magic and all of that kind of stuff. However, even I think Geralt would be far stronger than a Nazgul in most cases. So, with Geralt taking these potions, with him being able to use the offhanded kind of magic, right, being able to force Aragorn back, being able to bring out fire power and all of the... I'm not as familiar with the signs, but based on what I remember with the game, there's the fire sign and the force back sign and all of this, these things that would kind of influence and change how Aragorn could react. I do think Geralt really has a better shot one-on-one against Aragorn, just because he's much more of a versatile fighter as a monster hunter. He's used to fighting men, creatures, and monsters of all different shapes, sizes, and kinds, versus Aragorn, which is much more used to a smaller variety of enemies. However, I do think Aragorn has endurance. So if he knew what he was up against, right, and they both do in this scenario, they're both fighting each other at their strongest point. So this is Aragorn probably end of the War of the Ring, and this is Geralt maybe after Witcher 3, or sometime during Witcher 3. And so if Aragorn could endure, if he could put up enough of a fight to protect himself, over time Geralt would lose the potency of those potions. But if Geralt ran out of the stamina, the power to be able to do a lot of these signs, I do think Aragorn would have a much better shot at winning. So this is a much different conversation than the one with Jaime Lannister, because it really depends on how the fight occurs. If Geralt wasn't ready for it, and Aragorn got that drop-in on him as a ranger, that ambush kind of thing, I also think, right, if Geralt didn't have time to take the potions, or even prepare the potions altogether, Aragorn would also have a pretty good shot. But if Geralt is given enough time to prep for this, as most often it goes with monsters that he fights, I think Geralt probably wins unless Aragorn could endure long enough for Geralt to lose the effects of the potions and all of that kind of stuff. Also, just as Geralt would be losing the strength of the potions, I believe his sword would also be getting worn down. I mean, yes, he could put oils on his sword or whatever it is to strengthen it, but it's still a simple steel sword against Andúril, the Flame of the West. So that's another important factor here, is that Aragorn's weaponry would be superior to Geralt's. And so if he could just outlast Geralt's fury that the Witcher would open with in that battle, I think you'd be able to win there. So, just a quick recap, I think Geralt wins most of the time, but if Aragorn gets the drop on him before Geralt's prepared, or if he outlasts the prepared effects from Geralt and Geralt's sword, I think Aragorn would win that. Now, if we look at it from a larger point of view, right, part of power, as it should be measured, in my opinion, when we talk about fantasy heroes, and especially with The Lord of the Rings, is it's never just about the individual. It's also about the fellowship and the friends and the allies and the armies that they can call upon. So, let's look at them in a more warlike scenario. This is what I try to do with my Who Would Win series at large, but if we look at this, Aragorn is able to call upon Gondor, Rohan, Rangers, Rivendell, Elves, Dwarves, Men, Hobbits, Wizards. He's got a lot that would come to his aid. Geralt, he would have other Witchers to call upon, some of his friends from the different provinces or parts of the kingdom that he slays monsters in. There would be Yennefer, there would be Triss, so he would have some mages as well. Some magic on his side, and maybe even the friends that he's made. I know that some of the creatures that he's hunted, he's kind of made allies with at different times in the books and in the stories in the games. If he could call upon some of them, sure. I still think Aragorn has more firepower when it comes to just the sheer amount of armies and forces he can call upon, right? I'm trying to also draw the comparison here between when Geralt was fighting off the Wild Hunt and trying to defend Ciri at Kaer Morhen, and he was able to call upon all of these allies. The Witcher 3 has the player character go around and try to gather as many allies as possible for this moment, but it's still much more of a smaller skirmish against this hunting raiding party, a very powerful one at that, absolutely, but still, it's nowhere near the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in this capacity. So even though Geralt still has many friends that would rally to his cause, and many of them much more powerful than your average Rohirrim or Gondorian or dwarf or whatever it is, I do still think just the sheer amount of armies Aragorn would have at his disposal, I think Aragorn is able to take Geralt on in a much more war-like scenario. Besides that, Geralt's not much of a... He's fought in these large-scale sieges and battles, beginning of Witcher 2. I know he's in the end of a siege, something like that. But Aragorn, has done both. He's hunted in the wilds, he's fought on castle walls and ramparts and everywhere in between. So Aragorn would be much more used to a scenario like this than I think Geralt would be. Geralt is much more used to hunting monsters and one-on-one battles versus these giant all-out warfare scenarios, at least when compared to Aragorn. So I think Aragorn takes that one. So ultimately, this is all to say that Geralt versus Aragorn, it is a far closer and far more entertaining conversation, a battle that would happen between these two, than Aragorn versus Jaime, which, again, if you haven't seen that video, please feel free to check that out. But Geralt, man, in many of the situations, I really think it could go either way. But I think one-on-one, Geralt is more likely to win in a warlike scenario, or given the correct circumstances that we went over before in that one-on-one, then Aragorn's able to win. But, yeah, Geralt's just much more versatile, and he's much more of a hardened killer. He's fought so many more monsters and people and all of this. Obviously, Aragorn isn't like another average everyday human. He'd be much tougher than the humans Geralt's taken on, absolutely. But it would be a very interesting and close battle. Now, here's something worth mentioning as we begin to close out this video. They would never find each other on the battlefield as enemies, right? Jaime versus Aragorn, maybe, because Jaime kind of is awful. But Geralt and Aragorn would never find each other on opposite sides in a battlefield anyway. So this is definitely, I mean, obviously it's a hypothetical with just what we're talking about, but morality and alignment-wise, they're both good guys, of course, right? So I would highly doubt that they'd ever find each other on opposite sides of a battlefield anyway. So this is definitely taking two heroes and, I mean, different kinds of heroes for sure, and different kinds of fantasy, and putting them against each other. So let me know what you all think. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this matchup in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this. Share this with a friend. If you'd like to see more conversations, more comparisons like this, I have a blast thinking about this kind of stuff and trying to be strategic and tactical with how they would match up and fight each other. Let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments below. If you'd like to support the channel, we have a partnership with Mythologie Candles through the link below. Use code Men of the West for 10% off that first order, or check out Castle Con's Lord of the Rings replicas and use the code WEST at checkout. My friend has plenty of these replicas and swords and all of these great things to send out, so please check that out and take a look at our merch. Join our memberships and Patreon for access to our Discord server and our monthly podcast, an episode of which is coming soon. And please take a look at Masters of Mythology, our second channel on myths and legends. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members, Joby Weasel, Ed Patterson, Comic Nut 64, Zoomi, and Peter Sheppard. My friends, don't forget to subscribe to join the Men of the West, and thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.